You've got to have the knowledge. And that's in anything. And I would really say that to anybody. Know your stuff before you go and get involved with something.
Welcome to The Backbone, a personal branding podcast for people that don't fit inside the box. Today, I am joined by Amy Bird. Now, Amy Bird is a very unique businesswoman in that she runs two scrapyards called Connolly Metals and Countrywide Metals. And she's also built an entire community called Women in Recycling for women that work in the recycling industry that want to have their voice heard. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here. Cool. So for those that don't know about you yet, and I'm sure there aren't that many people because you've been shouting from the rooftops for the last year, do you want to tell us a little bit about what it is you actually do?
Yeah, so I've been in recycling most of my life. My family had a yard in East London. So we basically recycle metals in two yards, one in London and one in Birmingham. Predominantly bring it in from all sorts of people, from your white van man all the way up to your demolition and other merchants. We crush it up, shake it up, clean it up, and then we predominantly ship out in containers to India, Thailand, China, as well as Europe. And that's it in a nutshell, really. And then obviously my other hat is Women in Recycling, which is trying to get some more women a seat at the table, because basically we're brilliant and we're doing a lot of the work anyway, and it goes unrecognized. So somebody needed to put a foot forward, which we did in 24, and it's been incredible, really incredible.
Yeah, it's been amazing to watch everybody's reactions to it, but also just to see how much it's grown from an idea at the start of the year into an entire global community of people now. But scrap metal doesn't necessarily have the most glamorous reputation. How did you get into it in the first place? I know you said your family were in it as well, but what made you decide you wanted a career in scrap metal?
Well, actually, so I didn't, is the starting point of this story. I was never, ever going to do scrap. It wasn't on my agenda. I went off show jumping for quite some time. So my sort of training was that I became a horse riding instructor. Then I did that for a while. I went off on the show jumping circuit, which sounds glamorous, but God, did I stink when I got home. My mum was like, just go and have a wash. We'd been living in lorries at different venues up and down the country. And then I fell into modelling. I won a modelling competition, and that really opened my eyes to this big wide world. So within a couple of weeks, I was dumped straight into New York. I'd never flown on my own before, and it was a real, you've got to find your feet, sink or swim kind of moment. Luckily, I swam quite fast and ended up in lots of stores on big posters and, you know, doing catwalk shows, and I literally traveled the world. But with modeling, you're not constantly employed. So luckily for me, my dad is let's call him a strong character. So every time I would land from wherever, he'd go, right, you're needed on the weighbridge tomorrow. You're going to have to go into the yard. And I did, because I would never have gone against dad anyway. And that was my training ground, really. So I really started to enjoy that. I was interacting with people at the window, paying them out. So you can imagine the two types of people were very, very different. But as time went on, the modelling side felt quite fickle. I didn't feel like I was surrounded by real people. And then I was going in the yard and I had all these real old characters, you know, in the middle of the East End. You can imagine sort of what our clientele was like. And then my daughter came along and I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to keep flying off. So the yard became more and more attractive. And to be quite honest, what I knew that I did want was money. I wanted to be able to call my own shots eventually. And I knew that I wanted wealth so that I could provide the most amazing life for my daughter. So that's how I got into it. So I'd always been into it on and off, but it kind of just evolved into this is going to be my career as my confidence grew with that.
That's an amazing mixed bag of careers you've got there, Amy. It's really
Yeah.
So was it your father who started the scrapyard?
Yeah, so my dad, so I am one of three. My brother and sister are 10 years older than me. Actually, one step back from that. So my grandfather, my mum's dad, had a waste disposal company in the East End, and he helped build the Blackwall Tunnel in London. And that was using horses, and these big carts would kind of take the people into work every day. And then my dad bought into that waste company with my grandfather. And then he got into, he had aluminium smelting furnaces in the middle of London on the Thames, when they were very much done by hand. So you would have this molten aluminium, and they would by hand have to go and tap this hole out, and the aluminium would just kind of come flowing out. So he started that before anyone was on this kind of let's recycle and be good to the planet. Dad was like, no, let's make some money, you know.
So you're 3 generations in there at this point,
Yeah.
the family. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So you must have learned so many different skills from having to flex between the 2 different careers, and like there's a real skill, I think, in most leaders as well, of being able to flex your tone and talk to lots of different people. How have you found that sort of over the years? How has your modeling career sort of helped you with the scrap, and like vice versa as well?
I think the thing is, my family are from a background where you know, you hear these stories a lot. We came from nothing, but Dad really came from nothing. He was one of 10, didn't go to school, you know. And then when I was about 7, he'd got on all right, and we bought this farm down in Kent, and I got chucked into this sort of private school environment where my dad was the cheeky chappy cockney, and you know, the yummy mummies were all after him, and I felt like a fish out of water. I started imposter syndrome then before I even knew what it was. I didn't know how to talk to people. I'd go home for what was now called tea, and I didn't know which knife and fork to use, or you know, what even some of the food that's being served was. And they'd have nannies and, you know, ponies and pony club, and I had to learn from that point how to communicate, and also learned I'm as good as anyone else in the room. And that was really, really important. Not better than, but I'm as good as a whole person. I can bring myself to this. I can bring my uniqueness to any environment. And the same with the modeling. You know, you, particularly out in the States, they have bags of confidence. I don't know what the difference is between school and college and culture in the UK compared to the US, but the can-do, can-be attitude in the US and the celebration of that is very, very different. Very, very different. So I was terrible at putting myself forward for things. I thought, you know, if they want me, they will come and get me, whereas that's not necessarily the case. You've got to, even so in any field, whether that be horse riding, modeling, running businesses, whatever that may be, you've got to know your job, and you've got to research that job before you even get on there. Because if you're nervous, the only real way, nervous is okay, it makes you better, but actually to get over that and actually put yourself in line for something, you've got to have the knowledge. And that's in anything. And I would really say that to anybody: know your stuff before you go and get involved with something. It was like the modeling. I felt so stupid. Someone told me, you're going to have to stand in front of your mirror and you're going to have to nail your poses. And I always remember my mum walking in one day. She said, "Oh, you're so vain, Amy. Keep standing there in front of that mirror." And I felt really bad about it. I thought, oh, vanity is such a poor quality, because it is, isn't it, in the UK or everywhere? Oh, you shouldn't be vain. You shouldn't love yourself. You shouldn't. But actually I had to, because otherwise I was on the set in front of a camera and I didn't have a clue. And that's mortifying. If you've got a photographer going, this girl's not, and it's brutal, this girl's no good, she doesn't know what she's doing, send her home, get me another model in. I mean, that could be soul destroying. But actually, if you work on it and you stick with it, as with anything, you get better over time. And I think everybody needs to learn to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. What is it people say? You need 10,000 hours of anything to perfect it. So if it means 10,000 hours stood pouting in front of the mirror, then that's what you got to do, isn't it?
Exactly that. It depends where you want to take it, doesn't it? And I think actually that time bit, we are in a culture of such instant everything. We've lost that time that you need to perfect, not even perfect something, but nail it, basically. Have enough knowledge about you to know what you're doing. My kids expect to know something immediately. You know, where did it go wrong where we don't learn anything anymore, where we beat ourselves up because we mess up a few times or we don't get it right straight away? And then there's the giving up culture now, isn't there? You know, if I don't get that, I'm not the best at that within a couple of weeks, well, then I better go and try something else. And so people just keep jumping and jumping and jumping, and they never really get that feeling in your soul where you're like, yeah, I'm good at this.
Mm-hmm.
I know what I'm doing and I'm good at this.
Yeah, I have an immediate distrust of anything online that says this works overnight or get rich quick and all of that. It just screams scam, doesn't it? Whenever anything like that, because as you say, anything that's worthwhile takes a long time to earn, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Are you finding that sort of culture is making it hard to recruit in scrap now with younger people?
Yeah, it's massive. It's a big driver for women in recycling, and that isn't just for women in recycling, it's for young people. They just don't want to learn a craft generally, and certainly don't want to start at the bottom up. And it's really tricky as well, because there's this people pleasing thing going on. So if I bring in, and I'll use my son as an example, I brought him into the company, and I'm a real advocate of putting managers in between family members, and they have to come up, bottom up through the ranks. Anyway, when he started work, I said to his manager, he's not to go on a forklift. At least for the first 3 months, do not let him on a forklift. I want him on manual work. He's got to learn his metals, sweep the yard. I want him to really get into it. Look out the window after week 1. Louis on the forklift. Why is Louis on the forklift, Chris? Oh, I just felt bad because, you know, he really wanted to get on it, and you know, I want him to like the job, you know, and I get that, but it means that nobody really gets the layers of learning in them before they're constantly going, I want to do that job because that job earns more money. I want to do what he does, you know, and it getting them in the first place really hard. It's a dirty environment outside. Inside, nobody understands quite how vibrant and cool it is to be trading metals every day. You know, it's fast paced. It's like being on a stock exchange sometimes. So we're trying to get that message out. And the other bit of it is, you know, becoming a crane driver, which might take you 4 years to really get good at that and get that position. But you're talking 40, 50, 60 grand. Well, you're not talking that working in McDonald's, you know. So I think it is difficult, but it's because we've got to change the language, the appearance of it all, and we've got to get it more out there. And then it may come full circle.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess that's kind of where women in recycling steps in, isn't it? So tell us about how you came up with the idea and how it's kind of grown over the last year, because it's flown, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. And you know, so many women over time have said, why haven't we got something as part of the existing association? So BMRA, BIR. And it's because you have to tick so many boxes within those kind of frameworks that you can't necessarily always say what you think. You've got to be mindful of everything. And people were just asking me all the time, oh, are you going to go and be part of the BMRA board? Are you going to go and do this? Because I've been in the job a long time, I've been the sort of go-to for information. And when anything has changed sort of from a legislation point of view, I've always been the one sticking my hand up and sort of questioning why, how does it work? How's it going to affect people? that's not fair. You know, I'm really an advocate for fairness for all in what we do. So yeah, I just thought it was time. It was time to put my best foot forward. My niece is in the business. I was watching a lot of women who, like me, were sitting behind partners, husbands, fathers, doing all the legwork, putting all of the information forward, essentially wearing 5, 6, 7 different hats. And yet you would walk into any given room. Number one, hardly any other women would be there. And number two, it was still kind of an old boys club. Everyone's slapping each other's backs about what a great job they were doing, when, you know, the wife or the mum was at home drowning in paperwork, making sure that all the boxes on the compliance and the HR and the accounting was being ticked, and it just wasn't fair. And it was time to get that voice out there and let everybody know that it's okay to say, no, I do that. I take care of that side of the business, and it is as important as having the deal and shaking the hands.
Yeah, I mean, that is the job, isn't it, really? The sort of the person who turns up to the meeting and, like you say, has his photo taken, that isn't the nuts and bolts of running a business. And the old saying of behind every great man is a great woman. I feel like that dynamic has shifted massively, isn't it, over the last couple of decades? And women are now at the forefront of so many industries. Have you seen a shift since you've started Women in Recycling?
I have seen a shift. My fear, my worry is that rather than everybody working together, and I'm quite into the science of the difference in the male and female brain within leadership and within the workplace, and there are differences. My ambition is to try and extract the best from both, put them together in the mixing pot, and then you have a great leadership team. And what I would love is more companies to try and do that. But we've got a couple of problems. We have a bit of fear aggression going on when women flex and actually come out of their shell. Those in more senior positions don't necessarily support that because they're fearful of their position being challenged. Mm-hmm. That needs to be changed so that it's your position isn't being challenged. It's whatever the needs of the company are, and let's work together. I think it's difficult in that you think that senior positions are mentoring the younger people coming through. But again, they're a little bit fearful. There is a little bit of, I started from the bottom up. I had to work so hard to get my place. Why should I help you? So yes, we are seeing, and actually that's not men to women, that's women to women. Mm-hmm. You know, that's a whole other area of threatening behavior that it isn't threatening, but people feel so afraid that they're so frightened to open up and just go, actually, they could really help me with what I do, and therefore I can grow in myself and in my career. So there are more women in the room, 100%. Are those women necessarily all cheering each other on? Possibly not. That's a barrier that we'll be working on next year. You find that if somebody isn't truly confident in themselves and their ability, they push other people away.
Yeah.
And I think we need to work on that.
Yeah. It's gatekeeping, isn't it, essentially? Just trying to, now that you're through that gate, just to stop anyone else from coming through.
Yeah. And that's awful, because actually that stops a whole company from growing.
Yeah, definitely. So Women in Recycling was born. You held your first event last year for International Women's Day, and so many people turned up, and it was amazing. And now you've just launched your first ever board committee for Women in Recycling. So tell me about your plans for that and how you kind of want that to grow.
So the board, it was really tough, actually, because I just didn't think that many people would put themselves forward. So you spoke about the shift. Well, there's the shift. That movement has given those women the confidence to put themselves forward. So that's massive for me. I feel so proud of that. The board is needed because what's ended up happening is recycling is now everything. It's not just metals as we started out. You know, it's plastics, it's glass, it's aggregates. Metals is my field. I don't know about the other stuff. So I need people to come on board that do know about it. And then it became international, which was another thing that I wasn't necessarily anticipating at the beginning. And sometimes I really get cross with myself that I don't have a formal framework that I work to. And, you know, I roll out things on time and they're set up. And I get cross about that sometimes. But then I think if I had had that in this first year, this wouldn't be across all of recycling, and it wouldn't be as international and all inclusive as it is. So what we would like to do is, rather than it all being regional and having set people for set places, we want to bring onto the board people with areas of expertise. So if I've got a question about EA compliance, I can go to that person. If I've got a question about aluminium, I've got someone who's a specialist with aluminium. If I've got someone in shipping, I can go to that person, and the people within our community can also do that. And I think that's what it will evolve into. There are no hard and fast rules. The people we chose for this first one were a combination of those that have really championed the cause this year and like supported the whole thing, and those that can really bring something to the table. We couldn't choose everyone. I would love to have just set up the board with everyone who applied in the first year. It was so hard. But no, that's what it's for. And I think it's like a spider's web, isn't it? You've now got, you know, this central hub, and then you've got this next layer of people, and they all know people that I don't know and that are in their fields. And if I think about it too much, it actually blows my mind, because it is an enormous industry, more than people will ever realize, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you've all got such different experiences and stories to tell. And actually, I think a lot of any industry, like, we all thrive when we hear other people's experiences, because we can learn from them, can't we? And if someone else has a story and they like, I've been through this is how I dealt with it. I probably could have done it differently this way. If you have to deal with this, maybe try this next time. All of that stuff, now that you've got a board that goes global now and goes tenfold, and like, I'm not really sure I'm going with this question, but like, it's just amazing to see that you do now have access to all these different people to help with everything.
But that, you see that, I'm not sure where I'm going with this. Me neither. in general, like, and I think actually that's about living in the moment and seeing where something takes you. Yeah. And I think it's so authentic. And I could have potentially downloaded something that tells you how to run an association and what that structure should be. But the winging of it for the last year, obviously with your help, Sam, it's just made such a difference to it, and it makes it feel, and I think that's why it's worked, because it feels real. It doesn't feel like I'm selling something to anybody, or that I'm just reading something off a piece of paper. And that's really, for me, that's what I want it, and that's what I want it to remain. And that is also the people that we've chosen, as you said, have got stories and backgrounds, and putting that in a melting pot, that's, where does it go? That's the excitement of it. Where does it go? Some of it will work, some of it won't. The stuff that doesn't work, does it matter? Or is it just a learning experience? 100%, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember as well, when I first spoke to you at the start of the year, it feels like you were a completely different person back then, because you were just about to start all of this. And like you said, we didn't know any of it was going. But you just told me about a huge, huge challenge that you'd just been through in your business, and how you didn't really know what the next steps were or how to sort of evolve from that. But do you want to tell everyone a little bit about what that was and how you kind of feel now in comparison?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sitting here now and I kind of feel like this year has been the year that I finally recovered from the horrific sale of my business, which started in 2019. So December 2019, Steve and I decided to sell 80% of One Stop Recycling, because it had grown massively. We'd started it from nothing. I think we were turning about 50 million turnover at 42 staff. And the skill set that I didn't have was putting bums on seats so that I didn't have to do everything myself. And it had become too much for me. but I loved that business so much that I could see the potential of it becoming like a multinational. And I knew that Steve and I knew how to buy scrap and how to boots on the ground run a yard. But we didn't have the financial background to know how to fund that. So long story short, we were courted by a family that basically owned, as we thought at the time, steel mills over in India. They were from London Business School. Their language around the project was that, you know, we can absolutely see what a valuable business this is. We definitely want you and Steve on board. We'll buy 80% of your shares. We'll put 5 million in on day one, and then we'll roll out multinational yards, which you'll be in charge of, and we'll put up to 30 million in over the first 5 years. So anyway, the deal went through on a lot of trust, which I've now learned you don't do when you're selling a business. You do it all through your solicitor. But I gave the guys that were buying my business access to everything from day one: my Sage accounts, my stock values, my yard, my staff, my brain, literally my business plans for the future. Because at the time, I don't think I registered that I had acquired that knowledge over a long time. I kind of assumed that, well, everybody must know that. I now know that that's not the case. Anyway, long story short, we worked together for about 4 months. I was in the office every day till 9 o'clock. The money didn't come. There no money came into the business. They ruined the relationship with the suppliers. You know, our industry thrives on quick turnaround of money, and they came in, and from day one I was like, right, next week's cash flow looks like this, and they were like, no, we're pushing everyone out to 10-week payment terms. Well, you can't do that in this industry. You know, these are people I've worked with for 20 years. You're gonna ruin it. Well, that's what we're doing. It just got worse and worse from there. Steve was chucked out of the office, and then in the May, they just walked in and sacked us and said they were doing us for gross misconduct. Didn't tell us what that gross misconduct was. Then went on to make up just the most horrific tales of, you know, almost to the point of like Steve stealing a grab and driving it up the road kind of thing, just completely elaborately made up stories. We ended up having to go to court. But this went on for 3 years. And bear in mind, during this time, Steve wasn't allowed to go to work at all. I was only allowed to work for the family business. So in normal circumstances, it would have ruined us, and we would have had not been able to have afforded to fight them in court, and they would have taken everything, the business, the house. We would have lost everything. It was absolutely terrifying. We end up in court, and that was in, gosh, when was that? 21, I think. And what a horrific experience. 2 weeks in court. I was 3 days on the stand being interrogated over things that, luckily, back to know your craft, I wiped the floor with them on. I knew every single answer to every question because it was about scrap. It was my field, and they didn't. Won the day. The judge was just basically threw the book at them, you know, and we came out of that shell-shocked. We say we won, we didn't win. They ran away. They folded the company down. We didn't get any of our costs back. We didn't get any of our money. So we were a few million in the hole, and we just sat there and went, what the hell happens now? Steve just found it, we both found it difficult. I took my solace in the gym and on, you know, science behind behaviors and how do I turn this around. Steve was a bit more put Shameless on the telly and have a pint of lager, and we had some really interesting times in the kitchen, I must say. But then both of us just went, no, we're not going to be beaten. We're, you know, no choice. We've got a lot of children. We've got bills to pay. We have got no money in the bank at all. We're skint. So let's go again. And that's what we did.
Wow. That would have crumbled
Most people.
Yeah, most people, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Honestly. I mean, I over the course of the last half an hour, you've described multiple scenarios that would have crumbled weaker people. And it seems that each and every one just pushes you and drives you to become bigger and better and stronger, which is testament to your strength and in character, I suppose. Yeah, so I mean that's just a horrifying story, isn't it?
It is, but it's also the bit that I think is important for other people is it's a lesson in ego. I think that my ego was stroked by these people coming in. As a business owner, when you sit at the top of that ladder and you've got a lot of people relying on you, you never get a thank you for anything you do. You never get really recognized for what you're doing, particularly as a woman. You don't get recognized for how much pressure you're under and that you are keeping that wheel turning. So when someone comes along and ultimately we know he was a con man, but comes across like he's a very well-educated, very wealthy, very knowledgeable, smooth talker, and tells you you're doing a wonderful job. I mean, I have emails from that guy telling me that I am Superwoman and that he doesn't know how I'm doing it and how do I manage. And he can quite clearly see that I'm the one running the business and can't wait to work with me. My ego was stroked and I did things and made decisions on the back of that I never would have done. People came up to me afterwards and were like, "You are the most kick-ass woman I know. How the hell did that even happen to you?" And I will, hands up, say, be mindful of your ego, because people come along and they can do a lot when they stroke your ego. And that is a prime example of that.
Absolutely. It's something we've been talking about a lot this week, actually, just the amount of people on the internet that will try and sell you absolute rubbish. But because they are convincing you that your life will change with this thing, that you are brilliant, you are this amazing entrepreneur, you just need this one simple thing that will cost £20 a month forever. all that kind of snake oil stuff. But you do get wrapped up in it. And it is sometimes really hard to see what is real and what isn't. And I think the reason that we've been able to do so much with you on social media this year is because you're just shutting down all the bullshit. You're not doing any of that stuff. And you're actually saying, like, look, this is what happens. This happened to me. But we move. And with Women in Recycling, I think a lot of people start communities because they've been through something and they don't want anybody else to experience that thing as well. So you try and, it's a way of protecting people as well sometimes, isn't it? You think, okay, I can protect others from this. Is that kind of how you were feeling with Women in Recycling as well?
Yeah, you know, chatting to you now, I think that's probably was one of the big drivers. I think it was so horrific, and to take strength from that enormous failure, but just a blip in life, and show that you can move forward. Because you do come across people that it leaves them rocking in a corner and they just can't get out of that hole, and it ruins them forever. Like forever. I've seen people lose businesses and they can never recover from it because they're embarrassed, or rather than owning it and going, messed up there, this is why I messed up. It was unfortunate, it was horrific, it was a bad point in my life, but it's also a point on my journey. I like to think of this roadmap, and I like to think of all my signposts on my roadmap, and some of them are horrific, and when you look back on them, you're like, whoa, I took the wrong turning there, massively off piste for a little while. But then you also get to celebrate the bits where you get yourself back on the correct road and you take the right direction. So as long as you can reflect and identify it and keep it where it belongs, it doesn't have to affect you forever. And you're absolutely right. People are throwing stuff. There are two things you do when you have had a failure and mastered it. You get brutally honest and want to help people, genuinely from your soul want to help people. Or you go, right, I can monetize that. How can I turn that into something that I can really make some money from? And they're the ones that are kind of selling these courses. The courses do work. Some of them are brilliant. Gosh, I've done some, but you have still got to have it in your soul to do that course, haven't you?
Yeah.
I mean, I must have bought thousands of pounds worth of stuff over the years, and they still set with not a single thing filled in on them. Did they serve a purpose to focus my mind? Probably. Would I have done better if I'd filled them in? Probably not done better, but I would have got there quicker, maybe. So they do serve a purpose 100%, but it's got to come from inside you.
Yeah, absolutely. So Women in Recycling was born. You started sharing your story more. People started noticing, and then you started winning awards, and people started recognizing you as the number 2 woman in recycling in the entire world, which is amazing. How do you think Amy sort of 5 years ago would have felt knowing that that's where this is going to end up?
5 years ago, I was so embroiled in the nitty gritty of just keeping the lights on and keeping everything turning on my many plates. I wouldn't have even anticipated going up for an award or being recognized as someone who could go up for an award. I so underestimated the knowledge I'd gathered over the years that I wouldn't have even put myself at the table with the caliber of people I've been up against as well. I mean, the Women with Metal, I'm up against people at the heads of really big companies, and I just sit there and go, what on earth am I doing here? And I still do that, but then I remind myself, well, you've just put in 30 years of hard grafting. That's what you're doing here, and that the recognition is lovely. But I think for me, to show other women what's possible. And I think the recycling one is important because that isn't just about women, although that's a huge part of it, pushing women forward. It's about encouraging people to recycle as well. I do, the women thing is in my heart and my soul, and I'm passionate about it. But I think the crossover is that women will be able to easily go into schools and create this education from little children up about what does recycling mean, and we can take it down that road. That's exciting. I've not even touched that yet, really. So I think that having the presence and getting the awards gives you that platform to send all of that message forward as well.
Definitely.
Yeah. Have you started to notice a change in the way you're being received since getting that award, Businesswoman of the Year?
Yeah, a little bit. It opens up marketplaces for sure.
Yeah.
I think that what I've been really pleased, I've been to a lot of events this year, and I was concerned that certainly the men would be like, oh God, here she comes. Here's the feminist walking into the room. And you know what? Every single one of them so far has walked up, pat on the back and gone, so proud of what you're doing. Keep doing it. You're doing a great job. I wasn't expecting that at all. I know so many people in this industry, and I go back years with some of the guys, and I thought even if it was a wind up, they'd be, oh God, give it a rest, will you? But they're not. They're like really enjoying your stuff, enjoying what you're putting out. It's so insightful. I think it's because of what we're doing, between what you guys managed to extract from me and in the conversations we have, is it's not just about women, is it? I am a woman, and me telling my story therefore helps women have a voice. But actually, I think there's a lot of men out there, from the mental health side and from the just running businesses side, that are really identifying with it. So that's part of me trying to get this fusion together of everybody. So yeah, I am received a bit differently because people think they know me. I mean, someone walked up to me in the toilet at an event the other day, and she went, "Hi, how are you?" Well, yeah, I'm good, thanks. She said, "Oh God, I don't actually know you, do I? I just see you on LinkedIn."
That's
So, yeah.
amazing.
That's funny. That happens to you quite a lot as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
LinkedIn famous.
Yeah. One of my other clients was saying the other day they were at a medical device conference, and someone came up to her and started quoting one of her videos to her face and started repeating it all. She was just like, "What's going on?" But it's because it is powerful sharing your story. So do you have any tips for anybody else in your industry, male or female, who thinks they've got a story to share but is a little bit too afraid to put it out there?
Oh, just do it. It is, let's what I would love to see everybody do is let's get some reality injected back into the world. I think 2025 is the time to, you know, AI is rampant all over the place and it massively has its uses. Of course it does. But let's get some connection back. Let's get your stories out there. If you can tell your story and that touches somebody who is in a really dark hole and just gives them that little bit that they need to pull themselves out, then surely it's worth doing. And you know what? What's the worst that can happen? Some people will love you, some people won't like you. As long as it's your story and it's authentic, then find a platform to tell that story, because you don't know where it's going to take you. You really don't. And I have got the most amazing community from what I've been doing, and I wholeheartedly would recommend anyone to do the same.
Love that.
Yeah, brilliant.
Love that. Cool. Okay, so if people want to find out more about you and your work and all the brilliant things that you're up to, where can they find you?
So LinkedIn, Women Recycling, and Amy Bird on LinkedIn. That's really would be my go-to. I'm on Instagram as well. But yeah, go just type my name in, have a look around. It's a really lovely community. Get involved. And, you know, no question is stupid. No comment is wrong. I really would like more people to actually have a comment, and they're talking to me privately about things. Get it out there. Let's have some real intense discussions, you know?
Love that.
Get it out in the open.
Perfect. Cool. All right. Thank you so much, Amy. That was incredible. And yeah, we look forward to seeing what you get up to next year.
100%. Thanks, guys.